My name is Amy Williams. I am an office worker, turning 30 this year. I work for a local company. I haven't moved out of my parents yet. My mom passed away when I was little, and I was raised by my dad and grandparents. My grandparents used to run a grocer on the first floor on our residence. After my mom passed away, my dad, who was a chef, took over and suddenly turned it into a bakery. Even as a little girl, I understood why he started his own business. He wanted to see me off to school and welcome me back home. The bread he baked was simple but delicious. His bakery quickly became a part of the community. Whenever the regulars saw me in the shop, they always cared to ask me how school was going for me. Of course, I miss my mom a lot, that I sometimes cried myself to sleep. As if to fill my sadness, my dad and grandparents gave me a lot of love. There were also many other people who looked after me. I never felt misfortuned. And then it was time for me to get married. My fiancé was Ken Wolf, who worked at the same office. He was a sportsman who belonged to a club team of the company. He was always hungry that I sometimes brought him my dad's bread. Isn't it just heavenly to get to eat bread like this every day? He was so impressed that he made it his mission to share his feeling with the artisan. He came over to the house and hit it off with my dad in no time. My dad used to say, "If I wasn't a baker, I would have a big dog." He adored Ken, who was an obedient giant to him. On weekends, he would take him fishing or to his favorite bar and showed him off as his proud son. "Hey, I want to spend some time alone with Ken too." "Nope. I've decided to take him to a good barbecue today." "Stop it! Don't fight over me." The three of us joked around like a real family. Hence, I was really happy when Ken proposed to me. There was just one problem though. The wedding was still 6 months away. I was supposed to move into Ken's apartment after the wedding. He was usually busy with practice and tournaments on his club team on weekends. So I cleaned up his place to make room for my stuff and prepared a meal for him while I waited. Pre-newlywed life. As if to put on the damper on my sweet mood, there was one other person who came to his apartment. Mrs. Wolf, Ken's mother. "It stinks of bread here. Do you take a shower every day?" She sneered as soon as she let herself in, with a duplicate key without knocking the door. "I'm sorry. Our bathroom is filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread." "Huh. Your bread reeks of low lives. Why don't you advise your father about the ingredients and to adapt the latest trends? Does he import French butter? Uses organic fruits?" "Well, he buys the butter from a local supplier. The fruits are from the neighborhood grocer. It's not good to be indifferent about things like that. Don't come crying to me when his business fails." "Yes, ma'am." I would just humor her ignorant but proud mother's sermon. I used to argue with her every time. I stopped because it was just ridiculous. Even if I agreed with her, she was not satisfied but became more sarcastic. "I wonder why Ken chose such a dull girl. I went to the trouble of raising him to be a good-looking, smart, and athletic man." "Agree. It's a mystery." "Don't you just agree with me, but you should try to better yourself."
I still don't accept you as a daughter-in-law.
Got it. I really wondered how Ken managed to be who he was, raised by such a terrible mother.
The face like a stuffed roll. I wonder you keep a loaf of bread in your stomach. Your arms are like challah bread.
Ken's mother sneered every time I saw her. I felt it was disrespectful not only to me, but also to bread. When she asked to try some of my dad's bread, I brought it to her, but she took only a bite and left it. And then she showed off $8 a piece Danish she bought from a famous hotel. Ken's father was similar. He worked for a company that had several sales offices in the county. My town was chosen as a new frontier a few years ago, and he was transferred as the director of the sales office. He had been working hard and meeting some powerful people in the area to be promoted. I genuinely thought it was amazing that he would become influential in the community. But the way he looked down on us, a small business owner, was the same as his wife. Not that I couldn't endure their insolence, but the stress built up little by little. Ken got fed up with his parents and moved out, even though they lived close to his work. Although he shielded me as much as possible against them, if he wasn't around, there was nothing I can do. Frankly, if it weren't for his parents, I wouldn't want to know such insolent people. One day, Ken's father called us to come over.
Here's the guest list for the wedding.
As soon as we arrived, Ken's father shoved the paper at us. There were about 50 names on the list.
Who are they? I don't even know those people, except my relatives. Isn't it amazing? My business partners would like to attend to the reception.
While Ken lifted his eyebrows, his father looked triumphant.
Why do we need to invite so many of your people? We're only renting a venue for 120, so it's impossible. Why don't you just cut back on the bride's side?
What?
It's fair for us, upper-class family, to invite more guests. The wedding of the eldest son is also an occasion to show the power of the family. I've never heard of such a thing.
He glared at his father. His mother interrupted.
He's right. It's the custom of the high society. If you are the eldest son in our family, there are a lot of people we need to please. Unlike Amy, who's from a lower class.
Don't talk like that. I stared at them coldly, while Ken trembled from anger next to me. I didn't want to be so low as them. I glanced through the names on the guest list and then tugged Ken's sleeve. It's okay, Ken. I agree with you, Mr. and Mrs. Wolf. Let's keep 70 seats for you guys. 10 for our colleagues. 40 for my side. Is it good enough?
Amy. I'm impressed that you are so agreeable. Don't forget your status on the day.
Yes, sir, I replied innocently. Ken looked like he wanted to say something, but I dragged him out of the house.
I'm sorry, Amy. I promised that we would have a wedding with a few close friends and family.
He hung his head down on the way back. No worries. Your rich parents would be there anyway, no matter what. Besides, looking at the guest list, it doesn't look that bad.
Huh?
There were several familiar names among the invited guests. I'll show them the true power of baker's daughter. After all the disrespect they've shown me, I'm not gonna keep my head down. I'm going to turn the table around. I didn't want my dad, who was truly excited about our marriage, to worry. So I endured their insults quietly. I was wrong. Their pride and malice were unfathomable. If I didn't fight back, I would have been their slave for the rest of my life. Ken was taken aback by my fierceness. And then he said,
"That's my woman,"
with a laugh.
"Hey, can I make a suggestion?
What is it?
We can register after the reception."
What? I was a little puzzled by the unexpectedness of it. But his eyes were serious. Okay. I didn't know what he was planning, but I decided to trust my soon-to-be husband. And then came the wedding day of the Williams and Wolf families. Walking down the aisle and throwing rice. The ceremony went smoothly, and the reception was about to begin. After fixing my hair and makeup, I entered the hall arm in arm with the groom. "Abby! Beautiful Abby!"
"Hey, the cutest baker!"
Cheers and yells erupted from the entire room. Not only the bride's side, but also from the groom's side. I could see the stunned face of Mr. Wolf and the hateful look on Mrs. Wolf's that I grinned. Ken's father's proud connections included landowners and other powerful people with long-established roots in the area. Too bad. They were all customers of the bakery. I've known them like aunties and uncles since elementary school. Amy, you've grown up to be a beautiful woman. Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
I can believe that the girl who used to kick my son's butt is married. Oh, Mr. Brown. You used to catch frogs and stuff them in a box. And you look so graceful now.
Thank you, Mrs. Tate. You tried to eat the mushrooms growing in the park. But look at you now, amazing in the dress. Please, Mr. Lee. They all talked fondly, but couldn't they find a more decent episode? Ken listened pleasantly, but my face was burning red.
When I received the invitation from Mr. Wolf, I was gonna decline. But then I saw your name as a bride, so I accepted.
I couldn't help but laugh when they all said the same. They were like my guests after all. While Mr. and Mrs. Wolf went around to greet each guest, they seemed to have been told about my childhood. Both of them were smiling, but their inside must have been turning. They were shown the breadth of my family connection on the stage where they wanted to flaunt their power. My colleagues and bosses were fans of my dad, who always treated them with his bread. They surrounded my dad and seems to be having a great time. Although there was a lot of thoughts buzzing around behind the scenes. The reception continued joyfully throughout meal, toast, and guest speeches. But then, a big incident happened. When it was Ken's father's speech, his mother snatched his mic. Not caring about the buzzing audience, she began to speak with her clear voice. Ken was brilliant from childhood. He has always won first prize in everything. He is our precious son. Well, that's a bit of overpraise. But it showed how much she loved him. But I regret that I didn't teach him how to choose the right woman for himself. Huh?
As you all know, Amy is restless and careless and doesn't listen to what others have to say. It's her wedding, but she's showing off her flabby arms.
After everyone else spoke fondly about the past, she was trying to embarrass me in front of 120 guests. Even Mr. Wolf turned blue in horror. But she's the woman Ken has chosen. I will train her to be a good wife as her new mother. Understood, Amy? Huh? She suddenly asked me to consent. The glare in her eyes urged me to reply, but I couldn't just nod at this point. I have only one mother in this world. I refuse such a wicked mother. I didn't want to argue and degrade myself in front of the guests. Well, despite of Ken being a wonderful man, he likes rough and fat women. Thanks to that, I'm lucky, right? I jokingly turned over to Ken, who forced a smile despite of his rage. Amy is the most beautiful woman in the world. It's a shame my mom cannot see that.
Ken, you are being fooled by this woman.
Mrs. Wolf, please sense the mood. At that moment, a low, raspy voice rang out from next to me.
Is that all you have to say?
My dad glared at Mrs. Wolf with a face I had never seen before.
Since she lost her mother at a young age, she may lack feminineness. Even so, she grew up to be a caring, kind daughter who is considerate of those around her. I will not forgive you if you insult her. What can a mere baker do? His bread fills not only stomachs, but hearts. Unlike you, Mom, who can only look down on others. What?
She froze at Ken's menace. He snatched the mic from her hand, took a breath, and turned to the guests with a perfect smile.
Thank you all for coming and celebrating the new chapter of our life with us. We are deeply sorry that you had to see such a shameful sight. I am truly happy to have Amy as my wife, who is bright, energetic, and loved by others. I understand that you must be worried, because her in-laws are such terrible people.
Yeah! Shouts came from the groom's side's table. Mr. and Mrs. Wolf looked around with their eyes wide open.
Please rest assured, I am cutting ties with them from this moment, and I will take the surname of Williams. What? Ken!
The entire audience was stunned by this. My mouth was agape too, from hearing it for the first time. I assumed this was why he wanted to register after the wedding.
There's no way I'm going to let that happen. No way. I don't need your approval. What?
He hushed them coldly. He turned to my dad and asked, Mr. Williams, I'm less than perfect, but will you accept me as your son? The whole fell silent. All eyes were on my dad, who was unmoved. It was as he knew how Ken felt.
I've already thought of you as my family for a long time, Ken. It's my pleasure to. Please look after this tomboy of my daughter.
They embraced each other. Congratulations! A loud shout came from the groom's side. That triggered loud applause and words of congratulations. it brought tears to my eyes. I was the happiest person in the world. I wondered if my mother was watching me from somewhere at that moment. The whirlwind of blessings swallowed up Mr. and Mrs. Wolf's pleas. We registered our marriage the next day. True to his words, Ken really took up my surname. I was a little worried that he might regret for letting the momentum get better of him, but he looked at his new driver's license with a relieved look on his face. Apparently, Ken had consulted with my dad about changing his surname to Williams. He also told him all of his parents' behaviors, and yet he professed to marry me in tears. My dad was moved by his earnestness and became more fond of him. The bond between the two was more than I had ever imagined, and I felt happy and jealous at the same time. One thing I could say for sure was that Ken was the best partner I could ever ask for. On the other hand, Ken's parents' rage for having their son taken away was unbearable. They said they would cut all ties forever if he was to change his surname. But since Ken accepted it without hesitation, they were in a panic. Moreover, they turned many of the invited guests against themselves by insulting me.
I can trust you, so I would cancel our contract. I would not recommend your company to anyone.
Not only direct rejections, but the director of the company is lunatic. That rumor quickly spread that sales of his company plummeted. In this town where people valued loyalty and humanity, personal connections could be a source of strength, but they could also be a pitfall. It was foolish of them that they try to use others to show off their power without realizing this. They were so troubled and perplexed that they begged and threatened us all at once. Ken had no intention of forgiving them, which was a relief to me. Eventually, Mr. Wolf got a phone call from the head office and was blamed and demoted for his blunders. He was looked down by his younger subordinate and worked in humiliation. Mrs. Wolf was also in the depths of despair by losing her precious son to the woman she so despised and by Mr. Wolf's demotion. Moreover, her own relatives she had invited to the wedding skirted around her. Ken's friends told their mother about the fiasco, so she lost her place in a circle as well. By the way, Ken has a younger sister. She also got fed up with her parents, that she stopped coming back home from her boyfriends. Everything they were proud of was gone and only despair remained. Ken and I both laughed at their self-inflicted downfall. 5 years has passed. Dad, bread rolls are done.
Then help me with this one next. Okay.
Two men are hustily working in the small kitchen. Ken started baking with my dad on weekends. He wants to be a baker now, but since he is seeing success in his job, he will stay as an office worker for a little longer. I quit my job when I got pregnant. I'm selling my dad's bread online while I take care of our 2 kids. Ken didn't want the delicious bread to go waste, so he built the website. The simple bread my dad bakes is easy to sell frozen, and sales has been quite good. Our kids enjoy the bread baked by my dad and Ken now. These peaceful days are the most precious thing in the whole world to me.